Welcome back to Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Today is a very special day because I have my longtime friend Jeff Caldwell. He's a journalist. We worked together before at Meredith Corporation. And Jeff, how are you? How are you being these days?
Very good, very good. Staying busy actually, and so working from home and doing all the self-isolation and quarantining we have to do, but certainly staying busy.
Where are you working right now?
I'm working in my basement in my house, just outside of Des Moines, Iowa.
It seems like everybody who is doing interviews and stuff like that will have some of those images.
Yeah. I have a dog and a cat that might wander through here too. So just to warn you.
Yeah. So you told me off the air that you worked previously on a story related to the COVID-19 impact on the agricultural communities. So one of the main aspects of your story was the logistical bottlenecks that the COVID has generated recently in the Midwest. What can you tell us about that?
You know, that's one of the things that's been interesting about this whole situation, this pandemic, is it is sort of exposed some vulnerabilities in our system, and it's almost sort of accelerated some trends that were already underway sort of quietly. Some of them positive and some of them not so positive, but when it comes to logistics, there have been some definite changes on the crop side. Fortunately, farmers already had a lot of planting decisions made months ago, and had already stocked up on what they needed in terms of seed, chemical, fertilizer, and things. And so really a lot of the field work that's been underway has happened just like it normally would. That part of the supply chain was already kind of locked down and intact and taken care of. Fertilizer, actually, I mentioned that earlier. That's actually one area where there have been some supply issues. It's just a super hot commodity around the countryside right now with farmers planting corn and soybeans. And so it is, I've heard of some of these anhydrous ammonia terminals around the country have had lines hours long for farmers and cooperatives picking that supply up to deliver to the field. And so that's one area where agronomically things could be a little bit different down the road. It's caused some farmers to actually make some different decisions based on what they're planting. They already have the seed and everything. However, they may be shifting their expectations for things like yield because they may not be able to secure the fertilizer at exactly the right time. And as you know, it's a critical thing to get done in a very specific time frame. So that's one area on the crop side where logistics have played a big role. That's been manifested domestically here as well. On the livestock side, we've seen, obviously, with a lot of meat processing plants, especially on the pork and beef side, not quite as much on the beef side, with those plants having clusters of infections of the virus, they're closing down or slowing down processing hours. So we're seeing a buildup of supply, not nearly to the extent to which we've seen in the crude oil marketplace. Obviously, we have way more supply than we need there. However, there are some speculating that we could see an oversupply situation simply because that process isn't working as it normally does. On the cattle side, that's not as big of a problem because we can hold back cattle that were headed to slaughter. However, on the pork side, we could see a supply glut that causes some fairly tough decisions for producers.
And did any of your sources report any losses?
In terms of the marketplace, the and again, this is one of those trends that has sort of been underway for a while. In the beef market, we have seen a widening of the packer spread or packer margin, and that's the difference between the feeder cattle market and boxed beef prices. And so that's a reflection of the margin captured by the processors. That has widened considerably. And a lot of cattlemen are very upset with that, and rightfully so. On paper, it looks really bad. There is some additional risk that the packers on in processing at a time like this. However, I think the resounding calls from farm country, at least among cattlemen, are that the packer margin is considerably wider than what the additional risk of processing right now would underscore normally.
Mm-hmm. And other than the Tyson Foods meat packing facility in Ames, which was one of the largest facilities that was closed due to some COVID-19 infections, have you heard of any other closures?
We've had, let's see, I believe in the state of Iowa, we have had 4, maybe 5 now plants closed. I don't know the number exactly off the top of my head. However, I did see a couple of interesting statistics the other day. An economist brought up the idea that within 300 miles of Des Moines, Iowa, in a 300-mile radius of Des Moines, there are 11 packing plants for the pork industry, and 15 of the largest packing plants in the country process 60% of the nation's pork. And of those 15, 11 are within 300 miles of Des Moines. So we have a fairly high concentration of that business here. The same is true, I believe, in the beef industry, only focused in sort of south central, southeastern Kansas, within about 150 to 180 mile radius of the city of Pratt, Kansas, I believe, as the majority of the nation's beef packing capacity. And so there are worries that widespread outages and stoppages of work specific to these 2 geographies could spawn a broader disruption in the supply chain for beef and pork. On the bright side, however, I learned this week too that we have the largest supply of pork in cold storage in the U.S. than we've had in 3 years. So if and when we do see a supply disruption of any kind, be it just a simple shortage or a larger shortcoming, it will be a little ways down the road. It won't come immediately. That's in the pork side. The beef side being such a large business and with such a much longer production cycle compared to pork or poultry. I've heard people talk about the cattle cycle like it's a cruise ship, and you can't turn a cruise ship around on a dime. It takes a long time for inventory to change to meet some of the demand. At the beginning of 2020, we were sitting at a point where the cow herd for the U.S. was nearing a point of inflection where we would begin contraction of the herd, trimming down numbers. And so that's a dynamic that was already in place. This looks to probably extend that curve a bit, and it's likely that we won't see that contraction just out of more producers holding animals back. And so really, I think in terms of the plant closures or processing slowdowns, it certainly is happening. And I believe probably more so than we're hearing in the mainstream media here. I think the major market implications of that won't likely come for quite some time, a matter of months, I would guess.
And how are you seeing about the sentiment of the people about that? Because you see a lot of people that are very anxious starting from the President Trump. So all the people that believe that we are going to get out of that really soon have to step back and say, "Oh, not so fast." What are
Mm.
you? What are your sources telling you?
You know, that's interesting, and I've kind of thought this whole time that it's not necessarily the virus that's causing so much of this, but the human reaction to the virus. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the absolute correct clinical thing to do and way to manage the virus, we may never know that, because the human reaction element will somehow cloud it. I think you know, we had, when this first started, we were seeing panic buying in the grocery stores. I don't know if you experienced that there, but you know,
Yes.
I remember going to the grocery store and, you know, not being able to buy toilet paper, things like that. And it's just a human reaction where people panic and stock up on staples. We saw a big rush of demand of some meat products, for example, and a lot of meat cases. A lot of bread aisles were totally empty. Um, that obviously spawned. Those are pretty stark images, especially for in the United States. We're used to being able to go to the store and buying whatever we need whenever we need it, and so people took those images and extrapolated them to insecurity in the food supply chain. Whereas in reality, we have plenty of food in this country right now. The
Mm-hmm.
biggest issue is getting it where it needs to be. And our distribution and logistics systems are really where the hiccups are happening. It's kind of caused some people to call for more decentralized meat processing, for example, having smaller packing facilities in the future that might serve a metropolitan area or city or region versus having 10 plants that produce the vast majority of our processed beef.
And what are the exact current restrictions imposed in Iowa right now?
Uh, we actually do not have, we're one of, I believe, 5 or 7 states in the country that do not have a formal statewide shelter in place order. Um, the measures we do have in place, as I understand them, are sort of equivalent to a broader effort. A lot of specific businesses are closed down. We have, the state has been broken down into 9 regions, similar to our crop reporting districts for the agricultural folks. But each of those regions is given a ranking every day on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of the potential for the virus and just the status of it. And once it reaches a 10, that's when broader protective measures are said to have been going in place. One district in the state in northeast Iowa, I believe, is at a 10 right now. They've yet to implement stronger protective measures. Central Iowa here, where Des Moines is located, we're at a 9 right now. So
Mm-hmm.
we've been at a 9 for a while. I think if we do see broader protective measures, given what we've got in place now, I don't think there'll be a whole lot of change.
But it's still, you are far from going to a restaurant or a bar.
Yeah, unfortunately, the bars we went to when you were living in here in Des Moines, we can't go there for a while. And you know, that's caused a lot of angst, and obviously, you know, people, the longer this goes on, the more sort of nervous people are getting and really wanting to resume normal life as we knew it before. You know, my heart goes out to the people in the restaurant business and a lot of these other businesses that have been totally shut down, because they really are bearing the brunt of this thing economically. I think that we're going to see some, I would guess, sort of a phased approach to resuming normal sort of commercial and retail activity
Mm-hmm.
in places like this, based on necessity and based on economic contribution. You know, obviously, I think people are right when they say we do need to get the economy back to functioning, but people are also right that we need to do that in a safe, measured, calculated way to minimize the spread of this disease. So,
Was there any protest in Iowa?
uh, I don't believe there have been any organized protests that I know of. I know there's, and obviously in social media, anytime there's a press conference, our governor holds a press conference daily to update on case numbers and any protective measures. Obviously people respond to those. Everybody's an infectious disease expert now. Everybody
Yes.
knows everything about it. But there hasn't really been that.
Mhm.
One sort of noteworthy thing is schools are closed through the end of the year, and so we've been doing virtual classroom activities. My daughter's had virtual class work to do earlier this morning, and so it's taking some adjustment.
And are farmers one of the groups that are more supportive of the measures?
That's an interesting question. Given that farmers are well, and when the original sort of guidelines went into place, farmers were one of the groups dubbed critical infrastructure, and so their work is deemed essential. And so and that hasn't really meant anything in the state of Iowa, given we don't have any specific provisions in place. But in areas where there are, farmers are still able to get in the field and get their work done. Social distancing is easy when you're in the cab of a tractor, 50 acres from away from anybody else. But
Yes.
so farmers are, I think, right now, I think they're just so busy getting this crop in to really think about that. I think a lot of it depends on political feelings, on as far as how you feel about those things. I think if this persists much longer after spring planting, and if we do start to see more logistical issues as we get into the crop year, then we could see more widespread sort of opposition to what some people call draconian protective measures. I think for the time being now, I think a lot of farmers just want to get into the field, get the crop planted, and then kind of move forward from there.
All right, Jeff. Is there something else you would like to tell?
It's just it's a really interesting time. I had never thought that I would see something like this. Certainly the news this week of the crude oil market and what's happened there. I never in my life thought I would see crude oil worth less than nothing. And so that's another major storyline that's unfolding that's going to take a long time to, I think, work itself out. And we'll have some pretty major implications for agriculture. I just think as long as we take a very prudent, measured approach to how we proceed to ensure public health and safety, but also do things that the specific things that we can do, all the while maintaining that safety, I think we'll be in good shape. But we certainly will face some pretty unique challenges that no one alive has ever seen, I think, coming out of this pandemic.
Yes, man. I thank you for your time with me, and hopefully I will see you soon in person.
You bet, man. Can't wait.
Thank you.
Yeah.